Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Helsinki, Espoo, for the Millennium Technology Prize Forum. My name is Jason Palmer. I'm a journalist at The Economist, and it's a real honor to be asked back to be your host for today. As before, as you can entirely expect, there's a great program of events, short chats, talks. There will be music, there will be a competition, there will be loads of coffee. There will be the disembodied voice of an artificial intelligence. Also, as a point of order, parts of this will be broadcast on live television, so there's a few little problems with that. In the sense that that will be swinging around, so fear not. But also, I've been instructed not to speak until the red light comes on, which I must say came on a little bit late, so I hope I haven't already ruined the broadcast. My job in this is just to keep us on time, to keep us circling around the sort of central theme, how to make best use of technology without losing control. Your job is comparatively easy, right? Just a little bit of audience participation at various points. Now, for most of that, that is going to be using something called Mentimeter. Should be a QR code. There it is. Do go ahead and snap a picture of that, get the browser up so that you can cast your votes at various points. Let me get out of the way. I may at various points also ask you to, a little bit of show of hands kind of thing. Show of hands, who doesn't like audience participation? No? Okay, all right. Getting into the meat of it, another little warning is that you are going to hear a lot of the words utopia and dystopia. These days, the use of it as we now know it came from Sir Thomas More's book of that name in 1516. And there's been a lot of argument about what it really was. Was it social commentary? Was it perhaps just plain satire? But today, now, here, it almost doesn't matter that original meaning because linguists will tell you the words mean what they mean in the context of how people use them. So what Sir Thomas meant actually matters a lot less than what comes into your head when I say dystopia, utopia. Or what came into the head of Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde at these events, you can never go wrong pulling up an Oscar Wilde quote. A map of the world that does not include utopia is not worth even glancing at, for it leaves out the one country at which humanity is always landing. And when humanity lands there, it looks out and seeing a better country sets sail. Progress is the realization of utopias. Now, that's a little idealized, I get it. What's interesting also, though, is the history of dystopia, that kind of Greek back formation, the opposite of utopia. That didn't come around until 1747 or 1868, depending on your sourcing. At least 2 centuries later, in any case. But note those 2 dates. That's either just at the beginning of or just after the Industrial Revolution. My thought here, hypothesis even, is that the notion of dystopia is sort of tied to disruptive technological progress. Again, we're going to keep circling around this notion a lot, so just keep it in mind. Dystopia didn't come into wide usage until the early, mid-20th century, around the time of some memorable science fiction, but we're going to get to that. The thing to do now is to get straight into the program. This first session is 2 keynotes, keynote presentations, and then we'll have a dialogue. So I will get out of the way of things and introduce our first opening keynote speaker, Amandeep Singh Gill, UN Secretary General's Envoy on Technology. Dr. Gill?
Good morning, everyone. It's a delight to be back in Helsinki. Every time I come to Finland, my faith in human-centered technology gets reinforced. So thank you to the Finnish government, but also Finnish academia, private sector, and civil society for upholding that vision so that we land more in utopias and have to think less about dystopias. I also want to thank the Millennium Technology Prize for the 20th anniversary, and I want to acknowledge the laureate for this year, the 20th anniversary prize winner, Professor J. Baliga. Congratulations, Professor, for winning the prize. I'm a kind of a reforming engineer. So back in the day, when I was learning about electronics and communications and transistors, how they work, Claude Shannon was like a god. So the universe worked according to Claude Shannon. And it was mostly utopias in my mind that technology can better our world. I worked for a while on rural connectivity, using digital radios, and the power of technology to uplift people stayed with me. But then soon after, when good things don't last, I moved to diplomacy. And the real world, its complications, its challenges, that came in very strongly. But those origins of my professional life, when we were building digital radios, or what were then called transmuxes, that made the then emerging digital exchanges speak with the existing analog exchanges, still very relevant. And I often say I'm still a transmux, navigating between the analog and the digital world. And if we have to get our direction right, if we have to land more in the Garden of Eden version of utopia and not in Dante's Inferno, to pick on two other analogies, then we have to make sure that we navigate the analog-digital interface well. Technology is not going to solve our problems. At the end of the day, our joys, our celebrations are very much rooted in our humanness, in our analog world. But technology can be an enabler, can play a powerful role. So we have to get this right. So the answer to the utopia versus dystopia actually lies in our humanness, how much we can reinforce our analog strengths, even as the world gets more digital. So from this brief personal reflection, you allowed that to me, thank you. Let me move on to something really incredible that happened last month at the UN General Assembly. So 193 member states came together and they adopted the Pact for the Future. And as part of the pact, they agreed on a shared vision for an open, free, secure, and inclusive digital future. This vision is called the Global Digital Compact, and it's underpinned by 13 principles. It's underpinned by 5 areas with tremendous potential for good. And it is the first time that we have a universal agreement on the governance of artificial intelligence. So this is a big deal. And let me explain why. Artificial intelligence is one of those emerging technologies that has caught the world's imagination. It has tremendous potential. It's going to rewrite the software of our economies, of our societies, and some even say that this is going to reorder power structures. So a few years from now, we look back at this turning point and see, wow, things have really changed. And we really don't have a historical reference point here. People talk of the invention of electricity or the internet, but I don't think we have a good reference point. So this is unique. And there will be a lot to manage as our institutions swivel and shift. There will be a lot to manage at the level of national governments. There'll be a lot to do at the level of industry. How do we manage data? How do we manage the applications? If AI agents are going to be working with humans in most economic sectors, so how do we manage the impact on labor markets? So there are plenty of questions which industry will also have to figure out. And there's space for self-regulation, as it's called. And there's space, as the European Union has shown, for some kind of a national, regional response in terms of governance. But then I'm talking about the international layer. What do we need as the international community to help us get this right, help us land in the utopias and avoid the dystopias, whether it is lethal autonomous weapon systems running amok, or AI being turned into a tool of surveillance and enslavement of entire societies. Now, we need certain minimum functions of governance at the international level, and those have been laid out in the Global Digital Compact. They include a regular, scientific, evidence-based, independent assessment of the capabilities. There's so much we know today, but there's so much we don't know. And the technology is moving very fast. So the world will benefit if there's a regular assessment by scientists from around the world of the capabilities. Those capabilities lead to risks sometimes. They lead to tremendous opportunities, but we need to understand them at the source so that policy making does not happen in the dark and we can adapt more rapidly. Something like what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change does, but on a slower pace. This we have to iterate faster. Second thing we need at the international level is regular policy dialogue. Different jurisdictions are going to take different approaches to the governance of AI. That's all right. That's distributed sovereignty. AI, after all, has a role to play in turbocharging the economies. Economic competitiveness comes into play. Different cultural, political contexts around data come into play. But we need to have a place where we can speak with each other, learn from each other, develop a shared vocabulary of governance so that there's interoperability across jurisdictions, and private sector in particular can play across borders. Training data sets that may be cross-border. How do we manage those? Just one example. The third piece that's very important, and this resonates a lot in the Global South. I come from the Global South. I understand the development challenges, and I understand the worry, the anxiety that we are nowhere in the AI game. It's highly concentrated in a few geographies, US, China, parts of Western Europe. There's no African country, for example. If you list up the top 100 HPC, high-performance compute infrastructures. So there is worry, and there is a demand for capacity building, for help us get this right. Not only in terms of policy making and governance, but also access to compute, access to data sets that you need to train your own AI with, preserving cultural and linguistic diversity. So your own small, large language models. Everyone doesn't have to follow OpenAI, Anthropic, and other frontier labs, but we need more diverse ecosystem for which we need capacity building. So the Secretary General has been asked, the UN Secretary General, my boss, has been asked to develop options for how we can do that, and in a more distributed, networked way. So these are some of the foundations that are. I want to move now, at the end of my talk, we have a few minutes left, to how does AI fit into the overall technology governance system. And that's where the Global Digital Compact is so helpful, because it has these 5 areas, including one big area related to data governance. We cannot separate out AI governance from data governance, at least not with the current state of the technology. We have to get them right together. So there's a lot of work that's required at the international level, again, to align data governance, develop shared principles, building on successful examples like the EU GDPR, but also a lot of work required on data commons for the sustainable development goals. Today, there is internet-scale data which is used to train large language models, but we have a paucity of high-quality data sets in areas like health, in climate change-resilient agriculture, on plastics in the ocean. So we need a dedicated effort to build those data sets so that tomorrow's AI is more powerful, more pertinent, and its arc is bent more in the direction of good rather than more addiction or definitely more money for some companies, but it does societal, planetary good. So that's important. And then, of course, human rights, protection. if we have very powerful technologies, great data sets, and very rich and very powerful, possibly, companies. And some places are doing very well. Some people have wonderful lives. Maybe, as someone told me recently, the first person to probably live up to 200 years has already been born. But then, we have places in the world where, longevity is still in the 50s or the 60s. So how do we manage those inequalities? How do we manage the uneven impact? And this brings me back to my first point, which is we need to get the interface right between the analog and the digital. So we need to ensure that the human rights framework, the treaties that we have worked over decades to put into place at the UN, our work on gender equality. So if you have chatbots today that kind of undermine thousands of years of work on dignity of women, on not having gender-based discrimination, then we may have great technology, but we may be headed in the wrong direction. So we have to make sure that as we go down this path, right-thinking people, not just governments, but civil society, the private sector, academia, come together. They set good examples, and they allow us also in the public space to build capacity. I'm really delighted that Finland has worked to build society-level capacity to think about AI. All governments, all countries around the world need to think about this as they manage these shifts. And as they do so, there is going to be uncertainty. There is going to be sudden shifts in terms of, for example, call centers today, which are a main source of export dollars in many countries, in Southeast Asia, South Asia, in North Africa, are going to come under strain pretty soon from AI capabilities. So as they manage these, they have the trust of their people. They work in a multi-stakeholder manner, jointly with civil society, with private sector and academia. And we move more in the direction of those gardens of Eden, rather than the dystopian visions that not only we've been warned with historically, but Hollywood and Bollywood and other tellers of stories keep conjuring up regularly. Thank you so much for listening to me, and please endorse the Global Digital Compact. It's a document that's open to endorsement by other stakeholders. The governments have adopted it, but we need to work in a more networked, more inclusive fashion. And please work with us so that we get the governance of these powerful technologies right, and we build a human-centered, open, free, secure, and inclusive digital future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Gill. I'm going to just cherry pick a few phrases that I heard along the way there about reordering power structures, and even the word enslavement popped up there. Actually, what struck me the most is something a little more subtle, the humanness being rooted in the analog world. And maybe that's where some of the discomfort that many of us have is about that humanness moving to the digital world, which is as good an introduction as any to our next keynote speaker, Malte Lohan from Orgalim, the Director General of Orgalim, the Association of Europe's Technology Industries. Dr. Lohan?
Well, very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. 100 years ago, in a messy laboratory room at St. Mary's Hospital in London, Alexander Fleming invented penicillin. Was that discovery good or bad for mankind? Seems like a no-brainer, an obvious example of profound scientific and technological transformation, improving lives across the world. Let's jump back to the present and look at another example of profound technological transformation, the shift to electric vehicles. Is the shift to EVs good or bad for mankind? What about the future of our planet? It's not an academic question because Europe has already decided to ban the internal combustion engine as of 2035. A number of governments are pushing for Europe to go even faster down this track, while others are ringing the alarm bell and are saying we have to stop this, and even the biggest political party in Europe has swung behind reversing the ban on the combustion engine. So clearly both sides of this argument feel very strongly about which technological choices are right. Who's right? Whether we think about mobility, about our future energy system, about the way we communicate, about artificial intelligence, clearly the technological bets that we are making today are going to have a profound impact on our future. And 200 years of technological progress have brought immeasurable benefits for mankind. We are here to celebrate that progress. But some of the choices that we have made now also threaten the very existence of mankind. Climate change, nuclear annihilation, perhaps in the not too distant future, runaway AI. So given the stakes, if we get these big technological choices in the next wave of transformation wrong, we need to have some confidence that the societal machine which is making those choices is able to get it right. And all of us here in the room are part of that machine, and unfortunately our track record is far from perfect. So I can't help wondering, could technology help us make better choices about technology? And to answer that, let's start with unpacking how we, as humans, make choices. We are hardwired to think in binary terms, good or bad, right or wrong, dystopia or utopia, cost and benefit. Always seeing it through the prism of our own subjective reality. Psychologists call this splitting. It's a defense mechanism that helps us deal with moral ambivalence and our desire for coherence. And it's just baked into how we operate as humans. We can't switch it off. It's very effective for making decisions on a daily basis. Should I bring my umbrella and carry it around all day, or should I risk getting rained on? It's much less good for making decisions about which technologies will deliver benefits for mankind and the planet on aggregate. Take AI. We all know the benefits in terms of productivity, in terms of science, in terms of medicine, in terms of mobility, you name it. We all know the costs in terms of job losses, disinformation, spiraling energy and water use, perhaps in the future, existential threats. Now, even if you could quantify all of those costs and benefits, and that's a big if, you would still have to make subjective choices in terms of how you weigh them against each other. How do you weigh the costs of spiraling water use against the benefits of breakthroughs in diagnosing cancer? Where some will see net benefits, others will see net costs. So, often, whether or not society gets these big choices right comes down to luck. Now, let's come back to the question whether technology can help us do better. To do that, it would have to help us understand how we can overcome some of those cognitive limitations that are just baked into how we operate. This is where we come to the conversation with two intellects. So one of the intellects in our conversation will be all of you. And let me welcome to the stage our second intellect, artificial intellect, called Aito. Hello, Aito. How are you today?
Hello. I'm doing great and ready for whatever you need today. How are you?
Great. So, spoiler alert, we're not going to solve any existential questions about technology today. What I would rather want to do is a little crowd experiment. And to do that, I'm going to read you a story, one that all of you will no doubt recognize. Bear with me, because you will see in a moment how it connects. There is no escape, my young apprentice. The Alliance will die, as will your friends. Good. I can feel your anger. Take your weapon and strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey towards the dark side will be complete. Luke can no longer contain his feelings. He grabs his weapon and jumps, only to meet the opposing lightsaber of Darth Vader. Good. Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Let the hate flow through you. Luke hesitates and lowers his weapon. You are unwise to lower your defenses. You couldn't bring yourself to kill me before, and I don't believe you will destroy me now. You underestimate the power of the dark side. If you will not fight, then you will meet your destiny. Luke hides, desperately trying to get a grip on his emotions. Give yourself to the dark side. It is the only way you can save your friends. Yes, your thoughts betray you. Your feelings for them are strong, especially for sister. So you have a twin sister. Obi-Wan was wise to hide her from me. Now his failure is complete. If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will. The thought of endangering his friends fills Luke with renewed energy. He must defend his friends, no matter the cost to himself. Letting go of his resistance and mastering all his training, he jumps at his father. So here's my question to you. Who's the hero of the story? Anyone? Hands up if you think Luke is the hero of the story. Okay, hands up if you think Darth Vader is the hero of the story. Count 2. Okay, so here we have a great example of splitting in action. We are looking at this story through the same prism, and of course I have reinforced that with the way I read the story. No surprise, our answer is pretty uniform. Now let's turn to the AI and see if it has a different way of looking at it. Hi again, Aito.
Hi there. Great to hear from you again. What's on your mind?
Aito, from the perspective of a Star Wars fan, who's the hero of the story?
For a Star Wars fan, Luke Skywalker often stands as the classic hero, representing hope, courage, and the triumph of good over evil. However, many fans also view Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader, as a tragic hero whose journey of redemption adds depth to the story, making him heroic in his own complex way.
Okay, so this is interesting. That already adds a little additional layer of analysis. Now, let us go with this. Aito, from the perspective of a spectator in the Roman Colosseum, who's the hero of the story?
From the perspective of a Roman Colosseum spectator, Darth Vader would likely appear as the hero. His power, dominance, and commanding presence align with the qualities admired in gladiators, strength and ruthlessness in battle. His final act of defiance against the Emperor could be seen as a moment of redemption, casting him as a tragic, noble figure who meets his end with a warrior's dignity.
Okay, this is really adding some depth. Let's try one more. Aito, from the perspective of a bushman in the Kalahari Desert, who's the hero of the story?
From the perspective of a bushman from the Kalahari Desert, the hero might not be a single person, but rather the force itself, representing balance, harmony, and the natural order. Luke, striving to restore balance by resisting the dark side, could be seen as the hero, a figure in tune with forces greater than himself, honoring and protecting a harmony that resonates with a deep respect for nature.
So let's come back to the question that we wanted to test. How could technology help us make better decisions about technology? Now, of course, I realize we were looking at a cliché case of good and bad, but I think it's a great example of how our binary limitations and how we think about the story are limiting our analysis, just as it's doing with the way we think about the big technological choices we are facing. I think there are two elements that make the AI's answer fundamentally different to the way we would look at it on our own. The first one is frame of reference. For humans, we base our decisions on the story and the information that's in front of us. We trim the context and we cut out the noise. The decisions are based on what's visible. That's not the case for AI. AI has no filter. It doesn't limit context. So think about the way that the AI was including Anakin and the Force in its analysis of which are the heroes of the story. It is able to make connections in a way that as humans on our own would be invisible. If you think about choices like future of mobility, it can give a voice to those that don't have a voice on their own, say future generations or nature. So my first conclusion, we can get a much better viewpoint and impact analysis with the help of AI. We can democratize the way we look at the impact of our choices. Second fundamental difference has to do with sentiment. As humans, we default to attaching sentiment to the information that we see. Of course, we can follow the logic of the spectator in the Roman Colosseum who says Darth Vader is the hero of the story. But we cannot disable our basic assessment of right and wrong or good and bad, which basically says the Roman is wrong. That's not the case for AI. It's not looking at the question of hero as a dichotomy of good or bad. It's just looking at different interpretations of hero to derive different answers. And in that way, it overcomes the biases, the subjective views that are often limiting our own human analysis. So what can we conclude? Even a simple experiment like this shows us that there is huge potential in using technology to augment our decisions about technology. It can democratize the way we think about impact, and it can help us overcome the blind spots that are linked to our human cognitive limitations. Now, governments, lawmakers, regulatory agencies across the world are, as we speak, making historic decisions about the future of technology that will lock in those choices for generations to come. I would like to see a lot more humility from our decision makers that they can get it wrong, and badly wrong. And I would like to see a lot more urgency in using the power and the potential of AI to augment their decisions to its best effect. Now, let's be clear, obviously there is no magic bullet. The combination of human and AI can reduce the element of trial and error, it can reduce the element of luck, but it can never remove it. Some of the decisions that we make collectively in the future will turn out to be wrong. And so the ability for countries and for societies to recognize when we get it wrong, to take responsibility and then correct the course that we are on, I think will be critical. And in this superpower race for tech supremacy that we are all witnessing, I think it is those who will be able to recognize their mistakes and correct the course that will come out on top. So, let's push our governments to make full use of the power of AI as they set this historic new technological direction that we are on. And let's keep reminding them that they have to be the fastest in recognizing when they got it wrong and to correct the course. Thank you very much.